please include a pronouncer for anything the anchor could possibly mispronounce, even if it's your name. And things that you may think are self-explanatory or obvious, it's always good to include if there's any doubt at all in your mind. So let's just go back through the questions to ask yourself when you've written the lead. And reporters, ask yourself these questions before you send your script to your editor. I guarantee you your editor will love you if you do this and if you read back over things before you go through them. So, do I say something is being done by someone? Again, that's the passive voice sort of tip-off. If you're using the word by, then maybe you need to go back and recheck. Do I use phrases like last week or last month? It seems obvious, but there are a lot of leads that come out with these things in them, and obviously you want to give yourself you want to start with what's most current in the story. Am I trying to save the best stuff for myself, or on the other hand, am I making the host tell the whole story? And also, of course, am I writing complex, compound sentences that are going to run the anchor out of breath? Do I start with something generic, like a meeting being held? If so, maybe you need to rephrase that and go ahead and say what the meeting accomplished. Do I use wordy titles? Do I use cliches? Check yourself for that. And will the listener, this is probably the most important thing, will the listener know the crux of the story and want to listen to the rest of it after hearing the lead? Have I answered at least a few of those W and H questions? Who, what, when, where, why, and how? Spending a few minutes here before I open it up for discussion on feature leads. Again, I did want to focus on newscast leads because I think that tends to be where most of us in public radio fall down because, most of us want to write features. That's what public radio is known for, and that's what most people listen for and why we all love to report in public radio is doing the long-form featurey stuff. So I do think that a lot of times the newscast spot leads get ignored. But I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the difference. Obviously, feature leads need to follow many of the same rules. You want to make sure that you answer the pertinent questions, that you tell us what the most important part of the story is, that you make the listener want to hear more. But you can be a little bit looser with your feature leads if you need to. There might be a little less emphasis on the immediacy, more emphasis on grabbing the listener's interest. It's okay to be a little bit more free form, as I was saying, but don't go crazy. So here's an example of a not so great lead. And again, this falls victim to a number of these problems we were talking about, especially the being brief rule that it clearly breaks. So I'll just read this along with you all. In impoverished Honduras, problems range from a lack of resources for education to the lack of food and even the most basic health care. A group of medical missionaries from the greater Blanksville area takes several trips a year to help the Hondurans who need it the most. But what they've encountered over the years is a big catch-22, a cyclical environment of malnourishment and disease. The missionaries' challenge is to teach Hondurans the wherewithal to break the cycle. Dr. Tom Camp, who heads up the Alabama Honduran Medical Education Network, or AMEN, spoke with WXYZ's Joe Blow. Basically, you have asked your anchor to tell the entire story. And I understand here that we're setting up an interview and we're going to get probably some experiential descriptions and colorful things, but that's a lot to ask a listener to listen through in order to get to the meat of this story. So here's a slightly better revised one. Still doesn't necessarily start with an action that happened today, but it does tighten things up. A quarter of all Hondurans live on less than $1 a day. They lack formal education, food, and even the most basic health care. A group of medical missionaries from the greater Blanksville area takes several trips a year to Honduras, hoping to help break the cycle of malnourishment and disease. Dr. Tom Camp heads up the group. He spoke with WXYZ's Joe Blow. Now, here I've taken the liberty of taking out the wordy title, hoping that we can put that back in later on. Obviously, if it's an interview and it's already there, and you can't do anything about it, then you may have to put the name of the group back in. But if you can get it out, then it's a good idea to do. So, but again, here you see that it's not as strict. You're not having to necessarily start with today such and such happened, because it is in the context of a feature or a longer form piece that's probably going to be played in probably the C segment of Morning Edition or something along those lines, or the breakaway in All Things Considered, and it will sound more normal in that sort of more featurey vein. But you're still being brief. You're still not making your anchor go on and on and on for 5 minutes before you get to the crux of the matter. So that's about all I have to say about this at this moment, but I'd like to know what you all think, because ideally, if you were all sitting in front of me, we would have a discussion, because I'm sure that there are lots of ideas out there about what a good lead looks like and what it doesn't look like, and I'd like for us to be able to share all of that. And so if anyone has any thoughts, questions, ideas, disagree with anything I said, then please, now is the time to speak up and let George know.
Right. You can just use the question box on your control panel or raise your hand there, and I will see you. But yeah, if you have a question right now, go ahead to your control panel and hit the question box and type in a question for Judith if you have one regarding lead writing or advice that she could perhaps provide you to help strengthen your leads.
I mean,
Alex
I'd also be
is raising his hand here. Go ahead, Judith.
I was going to say I would also be interested not just in questions, but in if anyone else has advice that they want to share with the group on lead writing, pet peeves and lead writing and that kind of thing as well.
Okay, here's a question from Phil Gregory. And Alex, I see your hand up. If you can, go ahead and type your question into your question box. But Phil asked, you mentioned active tense leads. Would you also strive for present tense leads, the NOPW factor?
NOPW?
NOPW, yeah. The now factor.
The now factor, yeah.
Feature leads. Go ahead.
Present tense, active voice, present tense. I know that I thought that might come up. I know that there are a lot of people who believe that you should never say such and such happened in the past. That you should also always say something is happening. This is a personal preference thing. I personally don't feel that strongly about that. I kind of feel like, if something happened yesterday, it's okay to say something happened yesterday. I don't think you have to turn cartwheels and stand on your head to make something present tense when it really happened yesterday. Now, if it happened a week ago, then I would question why you're reporting it today, if it's a newscast spot. But I do think it's okay to I don't think you need to turn rhetorical cartwheels in order to avoid putting something in the past tense just for the sake of it. If you're giving the most current piece of information, and that happened this afternoon, I think it's fine to say, commissioners voted this afternoon for XYZ. You don't have to pretend to say commissioners or I don't even know how you would say that. It would be inaccurate, I think. So that's my personal opinion. I know that there are a lot of people out there who think you should never write past tense in a lead, and I respect that opinion as well.
Okay, well, Lynette asks, in feature leads, what about describing the look or or place of the person so the listener can imagine the picture being painted?
I absolutely think that is an important part of writing for radio. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be in the lead. I think that, it can be, and I'm not saying it never should be, but my feeling about that is that might be something you can be selfish about and save for yourself. You want, if you're writing a good, nice, colorful feature, you absolutely want to put that descriptive language in there. Like I said, I'm not saying you can't put it in the lead necessarily, but it could get a little bit wordy if you put that stuff in the lead. I would rather hear you set the scene as the reporter, and with your colorful description and your sound and all the other devices at your disposal.
Here's another question, I think one that comes up a lot. How important or helpful is it to write the lead first?
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that, whoever that is. Yes, please, please, please write your leads first. It always surprises me to hear when someone says that they write the body of their piece before they write the lead. To me, that's a telltale sign that you don't know what the story is. Sometimes writing the lead is the hardest part, and that's probably more true sometimes with features than with spots, but not necessarily. I don't know. The lead can be the hardest part, and I have certainly myself sat and stared at a blank screen wondering how on earth I'm going to start this story. And I talk to a lot of reporters who say the same thing. But if I strongly feel that if you don't make yourself write the first line of that lead so that you know where your story is going and you know the point of your story, then your entire story will be an unfocused mass of blob. And I really don't think we want blobs out there. So yes, Thank you for bringing that up. Please write your lead first.
What about a tease lead? Can they be effective, especially for a light story?
Yeah, and I think that's another maybe spot versus feature question. I do think that there are a lot of times that tease leads can work. I think it's a case-by-case basis, and you have to use it judiciously. Don't be too cute. But yeah, I mean, obviously, especially if it's a feature, it is a good device sometimes to hold a little something back. To make your listener wonder, what's next. But you better answer that question pretty quickly, or they're probably going to stop listening eventually. But yeah, I think less so for newscasts, probably more so for features. Would that be appropriate? And used sparingly on a case-by-case basis.
Amy was also asking about the importance of writing a lead first, but I think you eloquently gave your answer for that one. What if you have to write a lead for an event that's ongoing as the spot is reported? Do you just report the most recent thing you know happened at the meeting, or indicate the event is ongoing and the outcome is still unknown?
I would say on that, so you're at a meeting. Here's the scenarios. I think you're describing it. You're reporting from a meeting. You're at a meeting. You're reporting for this hour's newscast. You're probably going to update it next hour's newscast. If that is in fact the case, then I would definitely put the top line of the lead should be what happened, the very latest thing that happened. And then, yes, obviously in the body of your piece, you're going to say that this is ongoing and that such and such could change in later on in the meeting, or some other aspect may come up for a vote. But I do think that if you have the luxury of being able to file several spots throughout the course of an event, then it's especially important to put the most recent development up at the very top line of your lead.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
This next question, I think, is referring to a feature that's 4 minutes total running time. And the question is, what is the max time for a feature lead? And I guess he's also he's saying this feature in particular is 4 minutes total running time.
Your feature is 4 minutes total running time, including the lead.
Well, the question actually that came up is, what is the max time for a feature lead? Is the question.
Okay.
Following up, saying that the feature is a 4 minute total running time.
Right. Okay. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule. I mean, I don't think you should be writing 30 or 40-second leads. But I certainly would never say your lead can never be longer than 20 seconds or 15 seconds. Somebody may have a hard and fast rule about that to try and keep you disciplined in your newsroom. But I think that if you follow those rules of being brief, concise, writing simple, complete sentences in your lead, and not writing any compound run-on sentences, I think you'll be fine. I think it's a case-by-case basis.
What about a jokesy or clever lead, or setting up a story with a question?
Setting up a story with a question.
Yeah.
I think again with features, not probably with spots, definitely not with spots for your folksy cute lead, but I think that could be a device that could be effective. Again, use sparingly. You don't want to get into a rut where you end up starting every one of your features with a lead that has a question. but I think that sometimes it could maybe be effective if it gets the listener thinking about things. Have you ever wondered why the sky is blue? Well, there's a new study out that says blah blah. That's an interesting question, because I think that might work. That might work for a feature, and in the context of a news magazine, that could work. I would not want to start a spot that way. I would not want to personally, and again, reasonable people can absolutely disagree, but I would not want to start a spot with do you ever wonder why the sky is blue? Because to me, that doesn't belong in a newscast. But if it's a feature, then I think it could work.
Here's a suggestion from Andrew Meyer. Andrew says, when it comes to improving lead writing, practice and a good editor can help with learning and growing, but so can listening to other news stations, both commercial and public, during your off time to hear how other people write their lead. I think that's good advice.
I think that's really good advice too, and I also think that he mentioned commercial. I think that we have a lot to learn in lead writing from commercial stations. Now, obviously, with some exceptions, dead bodies scattered on the roadway. No, we don't want that. But I do think that the commercial world does have a lot that we can learn from when it comes to writing snappy, good, short, concise leads with the main action in the top line. So yeah, I agree with that.
Any other questions for Judith? Anyone? It's funny, I'm waiting for a response, but I'm not going to hear one. But you can certainly type those questions in. So I'll give you another few seconds here to type a question if you have any additional questions for Judith. I'll also throw out there the PRNDI motto: get an edit. So make sure whatever you're writing does get an edit.
Yeah, and that's something too, is that a lot of times spots do become the sort of redheaded stepchild of the editing process, and I can say that because I have red hair. You can't see me, but I do. And in that, a lot of times I find that spots don't get edited, and that's you do need to get an edit for your spot, even if it's from your the person who sits in the next desk from you, your fellow reporter or whatever that is, because the newscasts are some of the most heard things that we do. So even if it's 30 seconds, you still want to get an edit.
Yeah, here's a question: lead or lead? LEDE or LEAD?
Or intro, or that's I don't know. I think everybody calls it something different.
Tomato, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is, it's important.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions in here, so Judith, let me take the time to thank you very much. I think this was enormously, actually, no, here is a question, not a question, a thank you, another thank you from Tanya Kuhn. Thank you, Judith, for your time.
Thank you, Tanya. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely great refresher, no question at all. So Judith, thank you from myself and PRNDI for doing this, and hopefully we'll see you at the conference in Washington. And for those of you interested in the conference, we hope in the coming weeks, very soon coming weeks, to have our agenda posted at PRNDI.org so you can see what we have to offer coming up this June. And we have some great sessions coming up, some pre-conference sessions that you'll want to check out, from editor training to multimedia boot camp, and a couple of other trainings that you'll want to check out as we get that posted up in the next several weeks. Otherwise, Judith, thank you so much, and appreciate it. And again, for those of you who might want the slides, Judith, just email them to me, and I'll make them available. And I'll also be happy to make the audio available to those of you who are interested. So once again, Judith, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to everybody, and for all your input.
Okay. Thank you all for taking part, and we'll see you around. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.